Hi, Bob is back, and for this episode of Unlocking Bob, I'm going to talk about a topic of interest to me, foreign retirement. Why? Well, because I'm in it, and I have some thoughts on the matter. If you stick around, I'm going to talk about retirement and government pensions, the cost of retirement communities, whether or not foreign retirement might really be for you, and if it is, the risks, the challenges, and the rewards. I'm going to focus on the individual. Couples and families add a new context to things, but the bottom line stays the same. If you aren't in this alone, the important thing to remember is make sure everyone is on the same page. People will adjust as your plan matures, but you need that initial buy-in. If you like what you hear, click like. If you want a heads up about future episodes of Unlocking Bob, press subscribe. Be sure to check out my blog. I tend to provide a lot more detail and examples of what I'm talking about there. So let's start with some retirement statistics. Now, citations and references to the statistics I do cite are all found in the description that accompanies this episode of Unlocking Bob. Now, for most Canadian and American retirees, retirement is based on three financial pillars. There's a government pension or pensions, private or employment pensions, and personal savings or investment income. In Canada, you can retire on a full Canada pension at age 65. In the US, Social Security kicks in at 66 or 67, depending on when you were born. In both countries, you can apply for some government pensions as early as age 60, but your benefits will be reduced depending on how early you apply. Or you can delay applying for these pensions until age 70, and your benefits will increase by a set amount for each year that you wait. Non-government plans may or may not have special provisions for early or deferred payment. What's best for you? Do the math. Early retirement costs you, that's for sure. But does waiting really translate into more money in your pocket? Is there an advantage to taking early retirement and absorbing the financial hit? I'm not going to dazzle you with scenarios here, but in my blog and in the resource list that comes with this video, I cover some examples. Now, you don't have to stop working just because you're pensioned off, but keep in mind pensions are taxable. So if you add income to a pension, you may wind up facing a tax bracket that'll knock you on your ass. Oh, and an added tidbit. Canadian Actuarial survey showed that for those who retire at age 65, the median age of death is 80. So be warned. Now, it costs to retire, and the cost depends on the quality of life that you're looking for. If you've always wanted to live under a bridge, the cost is low. If you want to carry on at your pre-retirement level, your pensions and other resources will have to generate enough to cover those costs. A Canadian survey showed that for 2020, the monthly cost to live in a retirement community ranged from around $1,500 to $4,500 Canadian dollars, and slightly more in the US and in US dollars. Some sort of meal plan and housekeeping is often included. You may or may not have to share a room. If you need special assistance, the cost goes up. And as far as maximums are concerned, the sky's the limit. Check the description section of this episode for references. Are you ready for retirement? There are lots of good reasons to retire. You escape from a tedious job. You'll find the leisure to do the things a person really wants to do. Travel, cultivate a hobby, or just take it easy. You'll have more time for family and friends. You can change your lifestyle. You may be influenced by health considerations. And there are reasons against retirement. There's a severe loss of income. There's the loss of a work community. And if your life is centered around your job, that may be your only community. There's a loss of status, the meaning, the purpose in life. You won't be the boss anymore. You won't be the consultant or the expert. And then there are the fears. Fear of the unknown, fear of boredom, the fear of unhappiness. Now, let's talk about foreign retirement, and let's look at some of the risks. You may not remain financially secure in an ever-changing global economy. If your pension is indexed to the cost of living, you may see it increase enough to keep you going. But if it doesn't, well, you stand a much better chance of getting a part-time job back home than in a country where you struggle with the language or where you may not even be allowed to work. Change is always risky, and retirement, domestic or foreign, is all about change. You have full-time leisure. You don't have to get up early. You don't report to a boss anymore. What's your track record with change? Does it come easily or is it more than stressful? Now, a lot of people will say that their life hasn't included major change, but change doesn't have to be life-shattering. A new job, moving, relationships, dieting, anything that means a clear and different path moving on, that's a change. How well you accommodate change will have a lot to do with how you manage retirement in general, and foreign retirement especially. What about quality of life? What makes you happy is somewhat unique to you. Now, in your new country, you may not be able to catch the latest Simpsons episode. You like the Golf Channel? How about the Soccer Channel? Hockey, Major League Baseball, is unheard of in many places. Now, you can usually get cable access to the TV programming you left behind. It just comes at an additional cost. How much will you miss what you're leaving behind? Friends and acquaintances, neighborhoods, restaurants, bars, theater. You'll miss some or all of these, but will you miss them enough to spoil the next phase of your life? You'll make comparisons. A bar won't carry your beer. The restaurant won't offer mainstays you're used to. Street signs will be different. Currency won't look right. A bus driver may consider a rolling stop acceptable. The list goes on. Loss of the familiar is a tricky one to navigate. No matter how many times you visit your potential new country, it's only a visit. You get to go back home. But eventually the label home will move with you, and your next trip back will be the visit. Is there something you can't leave behind? Is there a deal breaker? Your health can change without warning. What's your health history? What's your family health history? Insurance is available, and U.S. expats generally see it as being very affordable. Canadians, beneficiaries of free or low-cost healthcare, will never see it as cheap. Medication that you take for granted at home may be different in another country. It may be ridiculously expensive. It may be so cheap that you wonder at the quality. Consider your health and the fact that at some point it may become the most dominant aspect of the rest of your life. Find out what resources exist in the community that you're going to become part of and whether or not those resources will help you cope. Are you still a good candidate for relocation? If you start out healthy, there's no guarantee that you're going to stay that way. And the hurdles you encounter along the way should not come as a surprise. If you lived all your life at sea level, a mountain town with an elevation of several thousand feet may not be for you. Prolonged rainy season, excess humidity, desert-like conditions, all of these can throw you into a spin. Now, I can't cover and do justice to all the possible risks here. Some risks may be unique to you and others may never be a factor. What are your risks? And what about challenges? I can't cover all the challenges here, but there's some major ones that I think affect everybody. Now, if people don't really matter to you, then it doesn't make any difference who's waiting for you on arrival. If culture and customs don't really matter to you, then the difference that they make won't make much of a difference to you. If you embrace all 4 seasons, then the weather isn't really going to be an issue. But if people, culture, and climate matter to you, then you have to be careful. There are at least 3 groups of people you'll meet as a foreign retiree. Remember, you're the foreigner now. You'll meet people who are native to the country, you'll meet tourists, and you'll meet other expats. Now, if you've done any due diligence at all, you'll know a bit about the people. If you've visited for a reasonable length of time, you'll know what it's like to live among them. So there should be no surprises. Then there are the people who visit as tourists. If you hang out in places where your language is spoken or where people from your country gather, you'll meet them. Now, some of them will have questions about your wonderful new life. Some of them will think you're an exotic species to be envied. Others will think you're crazy. You'll meet other expats. You and they are guests in the country. Now, some expats disagree with this. They feel they are now part of their new home. But remember, only people who were born in the country have the right to live there. Everyone else is there at the pleasure of that country. Even foreigners with citizenship can have that citizenship revoked, and they can be kicked out of the country. You can blather on about the money you spend, the taxes you pay, the contribution you make to community life, but don't kid yourself. If you can be asked to leave, you're a guest. You'll make new friends from among the expat group. Feel them out. Gather about you the ones who make you feel at home. For example, some people choose foreign retirement because they can't afford to retire at home. They don't always make happy campers. Some of them tend to gather in groups and feel compelled to talk about the misfortunes that forced them to leave everything good in life and flee. Why aren't their favorite products on every shelf? How disrespectful is it of those natives to refuse to speak their language? People who come to their new home because they love adventure, change, and new experiences will find others who embrace their arrival. Go slow making new friends. Spare yourself the agony of having to cut ties later. Political and religious differences, lifestyle differences, attitudes and beliefs, personal taste, all of these are things that can make for good friends or casual, distant acquaintances. As well, you'll be getting into new cultural territory, not just a new physical environment. If cultural values and local customs make you cringe, you have little choice but to grin and bear it. Some cultures may be comfortable with things you were raised to reject. There's no right or wrong here. Just know what you're getting into. Think about whether you can live with the differences and decide accordingly. Watch out for the weather. If you've performed your due diligence, you've made an initial visit to your retirement choice for at least a month. Pick the best time of year, consider it a vacation, and enjoy. Then, and this is an important then, go back again for another month at the worst time of year. I had a friend, we'll call him Mr. Sunshine. Mr. Sunshine had arthritis. Mr. Sunshine retired to Spain's Costa del Sol after a lifetime of wonderful vacations there. He loved the people. He loved the culture. He loved the hot, dry summers. But Costa del Sol can have wet, damp winters. Now, immediately upon arrival, Mr. Sunshine invested in property, and he applied for residency. After a brief but agonizing time, he sold up at a loss, admitted the error of his ways, canceled his residency application, and skulked back to where he first began. Don't be a Mr. Sunshine. Don't forget about language. You may find that Tanzania meets all your retirement expectations. Swahili could be a bit of a challenge, but you don't want to be restricted to a narrow strip where you can't function without being surrounded by people who speak your language. If you can't find enjoyment in learning a new language, your great new life may be severely restricted. Be excited to learn a new language. It may be difficult, but as you progress, you'll find that having to think about how to get your point across in a new tongue helps you think a lot more about the point you're trying to get across. And there's evidence that learning a new language has a positive effect on aging. It exercises cognitive functioning, and that may have a long-term effect on how well you manage on your own. One of the challenges of aging is keeping mentally fit, and it's difficult to do if your retirement offers you little stimulation and a predictable future. Shaking up your life is one way of staying alert, and one way of shaking up your life is foreign retirement. Like learning a new language, learning a new life keeps you engaged and focused. You're alive. Retirement's not an end. It's a beginning with rewards. If you can start over again in a whole new unfamiliar environment and embrace that change, then foreign retirement offers you an opportunity to reevaluate, reprioritize, reimagine a whole new context for your remaining years. Instead of life as an extension of something you've always known, you plunge into the unknown. It's a process. At first, you'll find you may just tolerate change, and then you'll come to accept it. And when you can celebrate it, you'll be getting the very most out of your retirement. At first, it can seem very hectic when you retire abroad. Time will change this. In the beginning, you can get hopelessly lost just exploring your new neighborhood. You won't know how to ask for directions. It's always a good idea to write down your address. You can show this to a cab driver or local merchant and be home in no time. It's perplexing when you use your best phrasebook solution to order dinner, but have no idea how to respond to the server's questions. Body language can be your new best friend. These are opportunities to learn. Explore your surroundings. Walk a lot. Get out there. You're going to learn a great deal about yourself. Gone are the reliable points of reference, the taken-for-granted resources, and the confidence that you know how things work. Shopping for and finding a new pair of shoelaces will seem like a tremendous achievement. Every day you'll find new coping strategies, different fixes for everyday issues, new right ways to do things. And as each test of your mettle is successfully met, you'll recognize a new and emerging you. Once you decide you've found your new forever home, you're going to have to get permission to settle there. Requirements will vary from country to country, but in any that I know of, you can't just show up and squat. You need a visa. Once you're a legal resident, there'll be terms and conditions, rights and responsibilities. You may get a senior discount on a whole range of products. You may be required to remain in country for a set number of days each year. You may have to prove a minimum monthly income. It'll vary. Do your homework. Make sure the terms and conditions suit you. Find reliable resources for any information you need, and then execute your plan accordingly. So what about me? Well, in 2011, I was eligible for my Canada pension and old age security benefits, but I decided to work a while longer, defer my pensions, and take the slight increase. Add to that I liked my job, and I was making good money, most of which I was saving, and it was an easy call. But I was thinking about my retirement. I lived in a great neighborhood, and I had no real reason for leaving. However, as in most major urban centers, the cost of rent and necessities was increasing at an alarming rate. If I wanted to go on as before, I could manage the rent for where I had been living, and I could find ways to earn a little extra money if I really needed it. But I wouldn't have any real discretionary money. This meant no travel, no big expenditures, no treats, no fun. I was single. I had a favorite neighborhood bar that I liked to go into after work. It was targeted at an older age group, so the music was at a low volume and the entertainment was of a piano bar type. A lot of the customers were retired. Some of the recently retired were like me. They had, prior to retirement, dropped in for a drink after work. But some of them were now coming in at midday. I thought about that. I saw myself as potentially drifting into that midday arrival instead of an after-work arrival, and I didn't like the feel of that. I started to look at my retirement options. I'd always enjoyed travel, so foreign retirement was definitely a consideration. In my adult life, I'd traveled through Europe, the US, the Caribbean, Canada, found places I liked and places I'd never go again. The rest of the world had varying degrees of appeal. I had friends in Australia, so I would love to visit there. Asia, Africa, India look interesting, but I don't think I would like to live in any of those places. I had visited Portugal and Spain, Italy, and Greece, and they looked like likely landing spots. but I also had an interest in South America and had never managed to get there. A little looking led me to International Living magazine, a publication with a focus on foreign retirement and good coverage of South America. I took out a year's subscription. After a few months of reading and some independent research, I decided that Ecuador looked like a good place to start. It had a stable government, had one for years. The economy was based on the US dollar, and there was a sizable US-Canadian expat community. There was a particular city that came up in a lot of the articles. I booked a month in Cuenca, Ecuador, and arrived on the banks of the Rio Tomabamba in March or April of 2013. I visited on and off for a couple of years after that and decided to make it permanent. I now have residency and I'm considering citizenship.